Thanks, Sam. Thanks, everyone. We'll do a quick round robin of intros, although you can see our names up there. But I'm Ellie Edwards-Scott, co-founder of the Advisory Collective.
I'm Laura Fenton, CEO at OMD UK.
Rob Pierre, CEO at Jellyfish.
I want to go Pauline Miller, CEO, because it is. But
That's going to be my
Chief Equity Officer for Dentsu.
And I'm Susie Thompson, the Media and Communications Director at Coty.
Right, we've got a lot to cover, 29 minutes, so let's kick off. So, what are some of the USPs of working in our industry, and has that changed since COVID? And is it time that we have a reset? Do we need a reset? Are we going through a reset? Pauline, we'll come to you first on that one, if I may.
Great. So I hope there's a USP, because I've just joined the industry. So I think what I would say is the opportunity to come and bring your most creative, brightest self to work and really think about how you can make a difference individually, but as part of a collective, is a real USP. Sometimes I came out of financial services, I know, a little bit of a bore. It doesn't always feel like you're bringing something new to the table, something that can really change and have the power to change behaviours and to really impact people at a much broader, a much broader range. So I think for me, there is a real USP. And what the pandemic has done, to the second part of your question, is it's allowed us to reset and rethink about what's most important to us. And when we think about brands and the ability of where do we want to spend the next 10, 15, 20 years of our lives, that becomes the real USP. We have to be able to capitalise on that, because that's what people are thinking now. That's what they're reassessing.
Would you agree with that, Susie? And from a brand perspective, I'd be interested to see what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, I do. I think from a brand perspective, it's really important for us to, reset with the industry. There are fundamentals that will always remain true. And from a brand perspective, talent that we bring into our industry, it's still about the fact of fundamentally what the power of passion for your industry and fundamentals of how brands grow are really important. But I think talent are looking for different things from employees as well when they, with the new job. And so we've got to reset and understand what future talent wants to come into our industry for as well. So we're in media and advertising and marketing is super exciting, and it's something that everybody should relate to. And I think we've got to make sure that we always keep that passion as well.
I think that the future talent piece is really interesting. We'll definitely come on to that. But before that, how about the awareness? Do we feel that the media industry has an awareness challenge? So do enough people know about the kind of jobs, the opportunities? Do people want to come into the industry? Well, it'd be interesting to get your perspective, because how we're competing, we've always got a kind of talent shortage, but we're now competing with so many different industries. So how do we battle and manage that?
I think there's also awareness of the number of capabilities we require nowadays.
Exactly.
So to deliver the campaign that we used to have a creative director and possibly a media planner, now we need maybe 60 different capabilities, from a data scientist, engineer, to a specialist on TikTok, then Snap, then Instagram and Facebook, and then you need all of the different analytical specialists on the analysts, and then you need creative and formats in about 1,000 different for devices and platforms. So I think more importantly, trying to understand that you can have a specialist capability and you collaboratively work to deliver these campaigns. It's just much broader than I think the perception is from the Mad Men days, where it was quite contained and very specific, the capabilities. I think it's happening, and I think that as all the platforms become more popular and we're able to communicate to the next generations, I do feel that it's not so much of a problem bringing people into the industry. I think it's about making sure that they have the requisite skills and they understand where they fit in the ecosystem to carry out the different tasks.
What's your perspective on that, Laura?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, from my perspective, lots of the USPs of what we offer as an industry haven't changed. It is a super dynamic, fast-paced, it's full of variety, it offers loads to kind of new talent coming in. But then I do think we need to kind of reset and better communicate. Ironically, for a communications industry.
We're not good at communicating what we do.
We don't communicate it particularly well. Like, I still explain what my job is to people all the time.
Yeah.
And you know, you've got to think like then for new talent coming into the industry, but also like talent in adjacent industries. Like we increasingly find that people who leave OMD are very often not going to a competitor media agency. They might be going to a tech platform, a media owner, client side, because clients now need more media expertise in-house, or to just other roles. So I think what we need to do is do the reverse and also be going out there to other adjacent industries and just talking more persuasively about what a role in media and marketing can offer.
Well, even the term the industry, I mean, it's so broad, isn't it? Like, what it, you know, is it the digital part? Is it creative part? Is it, as you say, the tech? There's so many different facets of the industry.
Yeah, and it makes it more complex. I think you summarised it really well, Rob. We can't go to, you know, we have relationships and partnerships with some universities and some academies, but you just need to have a much broader reaching approach now, because if you're going to get data engineers in, we would go to a different place for that than we would for creative talent or for planning talent. So I think it's just making sure that the outreach job needs to be like more far-reaching and, you know, more persuasive, I think, as an industry. And that's where it's going to work best, if we're all going out there and doing it, rather than, you know, as individual agencies or clients.
That talent attraction piece, I'd like to, I was going to come to you, Rob, in terms of what Jellyfish have been doing over the years and what you're doing now to attract talent.
Yeah, well, I mean, academies, making sure, so the way in which we run our academies, because I believe one of the USPs, I'll start with that, is that it moves so quickly. A year in digital, there are no veterans. 2 years ago, somebody says, I used to do something on a platform, there's probably 3 or 4 different platforms. And so if you jump into our industry, you could become as qualified and you could be just as competitive for the different roles and the promotion opportunities. So
That's a really good
that's
point.
one big unique selling point. And so articulating that to audiences, and because those skills could be learnt so quickly and you could be in demand so quickly, I think the academies are the best way. So going to those places where you've got underrepresented groups and communities that would never even know about the opportunity, and that they can catch up so quickly, and it's more about just talent, ambition, aptitude, and making sure that we can get them up to speed from a skill perspective, put them in an environment where they can understand how, you know, the working environment and be able to work at that pace. I think that's how we're doing it. So it's producing, creating the capabilities through ambitious talent.
And it's constantly learning, isn't it? I mean, you touched upon it earlier in terms of the fact that it is changing so much means that, you know, you have to constantly learn, you have to constantly evolve. We're all having to adapt and evolve as new platforms, new technologies come in, because it doesn't stand still. How do you manage that from a brand and being elements being in-house, Susie?
I think it was quite interesting when Laura mentioned about, you know, people who are leaving agency, going to client side, brand side. That was my journey myself, because I think...
Can you come back, please?
But because with brand, and it's not about an in-housing or an outsourcing role, but with both the skill sets and the pace of change with the landscape, from a brand side, we need to make sure that we're fully informed to have those partnership discussions at the pace that they need to go into. So it's not like, even with regards to a challenge or a strategy, being able to outsource. Actually, from a brand side, we need to have the information from both specialists in-house, but to work with external partners as partners, make sure that they're not, you know, a briefed agency to come back with a response, but actually hand in hand, know about our business models, know about our, you know, how our brands grow, our growth strategy, so that we can work together in tandem. And so I think that's really important, from both facilitating the agility that and the pace that we need to work at. So I think that's definitely one thing, but also with regards to where we recruit from and how we recruit talent, as I say, with brand and marketing, but even our commercial and our supply chain functions, all in-house. They used to be quite a traditional method of bringing in talent, as you mentioned, from kind of like university fairs or certainly kind of like traditional marketeers and that path of growth. But now, when, you know, our marketing function isn't just kind of like with traditional distribution and supply chain, we're having to think about content creation and working with different agencies, which means we're bringing in that young talent and fresh talent from totally different paths. I mean, recently we've just employed within my team a couple of content creators for broad social platforms. And in fact, we recruited that our HR team had a little bit of a hot flush moment, but we did all of the recruitment through TikTok. And actually just asked them to be supplying and sharing content videos with us. You know, there was no CVs or official application process.
That's great.
So I think we've got to start to think differently how we do that outreach to young talent, depending on what we're looking for.
On the outreach piece, and Pauline, as you say, you know, you've come from the financial industry into the media industry, and within your role in EMEA, what about your current workforce, and how are the current workforce managing with this coming back to work, flexible working, hybrid working? How are you having to adapt, and what are you doing to ensure that, you know, you can retain talent as well as attracting talent?
What haven't we all done to try and retain talent in a period where everybody's reassessing their lives? What haven't we done to try and encourage people to come back when it's a forced, you know, stop-start approach of come back to the office, no, we're back in lockdown, come back, and now we're back, and there's no masks, and everybody can go freely, but nobody wants to come back in. And so what you've got to do is you've got to recognise why do people come to the office, and it's not to work. Because if that's what you're telling them, then they are going to say, but I've been doing the work. Yeah. So you've got to reassess or effectively just say, hey, we're going to pay you to come in for social time. We're going to pay you to reconnect with people. We're going to pay you to come in and not do the work that you were doing at home, but come in and do a different type of work. And that's what we've got to get people thinking. I have come to the office this morning, I've come here, I'm going home for the rest of the afternoon. We've got to allow people to be able to think about flexing their diaries in ways that work for them, that allow, and for us, you know, employers have got, it's a two-way partnership. So, you know, tomorrow we've got drinks in the evening. I wasn't going to go, but actually everybody in the team wants me to come in, so hey, I'll come in for the drinks. I'm going to do a whole day, but that will be the only whole day I've done in the office for maybe 6-7 weeks. So it is about recognising that I'm getting the work done, but it's different blocks and different times, and I will happily go in at 11 and leave at 3, or go in at 3 and leave at 8. So I'm flexing the time, and we're not there yet. Everybody was on an equal playing field when we were working from home. From the CEO to the receptionist, everyone was at home. And we've got to recognise that as people come back, we don't create a two-tier system, one where those that are in the office regularly benefiting from the relationships that they form and those cooler chats and so forth, and one where those that just work from the screen.
But what you're talking of is hard to manage, isn't it? From a you know, and I'm looking to come to you now, Bob, and say, how do you manage that on a local, let alone global scale? Because yes, you want to have that flexibility and offer that to staff, but how do you keep track of them?
You force people in, and they will make their decision. So if you force them in and say, I want you back 5 days a week, that's a question. We say 2 to 3 days, and I can tell you, because I've seen it in my last organisation, they said 2 days, 1 in 10, then they realised nobody was coming in 1 in 10, so then they said, all right, you're all coming in 3 days a week, full stop. So you've got to find the balance, and you've got to encourage people in. But it's hard, because otherwise you lose space.
What's right for your organisation, isn't it? So talk about the jellyfish.
No, sorry, I was just when you said right for the organisation, but I think also right for the skill set or the specialisms. Because one of the things that, you know, I think people are now learning to understand what part of roles or remits that they have are best to do collaboratively and in person versus what's kind of like better in isolation. Or Coty, I have to say, I'm really proud of how our business has articulated the fact that they're trying to encourage the best work possible and the best environment possible. And actually it means that some of our market insights and our analytics team, they actually thrive from more of an office environment. So for them, it is actually they've come back a lot of the time, and also that's where some of our commercial teams are actually, you know, because of how they work together and with some of our retailers, for example. But from the marketing team perspective, and actually how, as to say, the best environment possible, that's potentially a lot of the time not from home and not in the office, but it's actually where is it with external partners, or where is it with kind of like one-to-one appointments, etc. So I think it's not necessarily about the organisation, but it's with regards to understanding your role within that organisation.
Do you agree with that, Rob?
Yes, and it also depends on the demographic of your of the people within your organisation. It depends on how you collaborate, because I don't think it's actually, a lot of the conversations have been around being at home and the commute, etc. But actually, it's about flexibility. So it is about, if I'm not in the office, I can do the hours that suit me.
Yeah.
But exponentially, 2,300 people trying to create a meeting at any one point, if your calendars aren't always real time, up to date with where you are at what time, trying to get people to work together. That's one issue. The second issue is the whole hybrid thing. I think it was easier when everyone was at home, but the minute you get that whole scenario where you're trying to do hybrid, and there's so many different challenges. One of the ones that we take for granted is that in a room, multiple people talking, our brains, if the sound waves are coming from different locations, you can isolate and you can actually hear one thing. But if you're the one outside of the room and it comes in one sound file, you can't hear a thing, and you feel so isolated. And so these are all the little, what seems innocuous and insignificant are making a huge difference and make it very frustrating. And it's a bit like the old adage that if you're in the group and outside smoking with the boss, you have all the conversations. Everybody knows. If you're in the office, there are 3 people in that room. As soon as that red phone's hit, you're out the room and they're all carrying on the conversation. You will get that divide you were talking about, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So, I think the younger people, I can talk too long on this, but the younger people, I think it's the analogy I used once is if our job was chopping wood, then we're all chopping wood in the office, and then what people are calling a distraction, you hear something, you get exposed to one of the leaders and the experienced people doing something, you sharpen the axe, you learn something, and then what you're calling a distraction is actually making you better. When everybody went home, they said, look at me, we've proven it works, we've chopped so much wood. But over time, it just got more and more blunt. And I think a year in, we're seeing that the ones that need support and to learn and imitate and to observe their environments, they're the ones losing out the most. The senior people are living off
and
that
that's
equity.
younger and older, by the way. I mean, talent isn't just young. Just want to say that. Not just young, but anybody joining an organisation, you've got to learn the organisation and make those connections. And how do you build those connections outside of your immediate team of work team? So you want to be able to, you need to go in and live and feel the organisation you've joined, not just what they had on their website. And it's so hard to do that unless you start to come in. And as the talent, which is revolving around our industry, and we're trying to attract that talent in, how do we create those experiences for them to be onboarded and want to stay in the organisations that they've joined?
I think it's more noticeable for the entry-level talent, though, just because they've never been in that office environment before. So we're starting, we've observed
They haven't got
really,
the culture, they don't know.
Yeah, and you just observe some funny things. Like, I was in a meeting the other day and there was a couple of junior people in the room and these clients walked in and they were the only ones in the room. And they just kind of sat down, kind of got their stuff ready, and I'm like, that's when you say, can I take your coat? Would you like a cup of tea? And it's almost as if they were at home in their, let's start the meeting. And it's like, you just think, but they've never kind of witnessed and observed the office etiquette. And it's those little things. And you think, well, if that's one obvious example, but that's being replicated in the work all over the place, isn't it? Because they've not been able to absorb and, learn from people.
Isn't it great? They might reset how office etiquette should work.
Right.
Let's just start the meeting. Put your own coat down. Grab your own tea. I love it.
I'm going to come to you, Susie, in terms of the difference between, a brand within the media industry versus an agency within the media industry, and in terms of what you're doing to attract. So, the way that I was interested when you talked to me about the way that you work with Zenith in the UK and obviously Publicis globally. Talk a little bit about that process and how you make sure you've got the right teams for your brands.
I think certainly for myself and with my function as media and comms director, I do work, as I say, incredibly closely with our agency. As I say, sometimes there's the conversation of how much is in-house versus outsourced. With Coty, we're very much with regards to we have our lead business partner and work really closely to them. I think I touched on it earlier, but then the importance of making sure that my agency is the extension of my team, that they're as passionate and understand our business and how our business grows and operates as much as any of my immediate in-house team members. But that also means that I have such a strong vested interest in the talent that my agency's hiring and retaining, as well as kind of like I'm hiring in-house. So it's almost, I've got kind of like, yes, I hire for my internal team, but also I'm incredibly close to my client partner and my agency to make sure that they're building the right team to service us as possible, to the extent that certainly even for when we get to the senior roles within my agency team, I'm involved in final round of interviews, just to make sure that they've got the chemistry right and I can see the dynamics of my agency team will work with the dynamics of our in-house. And I think also when my agency might be lying to me, you never know, just rubbing my ego, but they do say that actually having that more collaborative relationship between client and agency actually helps with the agency retention and wanting people within the agencies to work on a particular brand or work on a particular account, because they know we're creating their role as much as they're creating ours, as an example. I know there are some brands, some accounts within the industry that are known as hell and hideous to work on, and it actually makes an agency's job really difficult to get a certain planner or strategist to work on that brand. So I think there's, from the attracting talent within an agency, it's actually really important for them to know that they've got good client relationships as well.
It's about matching that talent and that agency talent.
See, I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, the only way to know for sure maybe is if we worked with you on
Straight in there.
See what you did there. Fast track up to procurement.
Do you know, I think from what Susie says, I think the thing, about a lot of this discussion and everything, obviously I think lots of us in the room are feeling the pain of the talent crunch and people reassessing and, choosing different career paths, and, many of those might be in different industries. But it makes me feel very hopeful, because I think it's become at the top, it's so far to the top of the agenda now. We will come out of this period of time in a much, much, much better place. The fact that it's, a big part of the conversations we're having with clients now about how do we create environments on particular client accounts which encourage best talent, full motivation and therefore retention, plus hybrid, plus flexible working, plus, everything that's coming from all of us trying to become the stickiest, employer brands possible. I really believe we'll come out of this period of time in a much better place, and with a much stronger value exchange.
On that point, Laura, so how do we continue to foster that truly inclusive environment? Inclusivity is something that, it's been often levied at our industry in terms of us not being inclusive enough, and it's something that has been on the agenda for years. But how do we really ensure that, we can make people, or create an environment, that allows people to kind of bring their best self or most genuine self to work? How do we do that?
I mean, it's such a big question, isn't it? And
it is, sorry.
No. And,
you can answer it.
Well, I'll tell you what the answer is, everyone. Get your pens ready. No, but I think there's so much to it. A huge part of it is creating an inclusive culture and environment, and there's lots of different elements to that. But one thing that we're working on at the moment, which I think is interesting, is whilst we need the big USPs for our industry that attract talent in, we believe that increasingly it's also about creating kind of individualised experiences for people when they get to OMD or get to, whatever place it is that they work. So whether that's from a benefits perspective, whether that's from a working schedule perspective, there's lots of different ways in which that can show up. But as much as possible, we want people to feel like they're able to kind of select and create, the employee experience and the value exchange that's most relevant for them.
It's a really interesting approach.
And you know, where we're starting to do that, whether it's, you know, I know lots of people are doing these brilliant initiatives now, but whether it's, you know, flexible bank holidays or picking whether it's this financial benefit or that financial benefit, or you've got a training budget and here's all the different ways in which we can help you find that, you know, individualized learning path. I think actually for me, all of that is fundamentally about inclusivity, because, you know, roll back the clock a few years, it was pretty much, this is the way we do things. We've got a culture.
You fit into it.
It suits a certain type of person. If you've got care and responsibilities, if you've got whatever else it is, it kind of doesn't. And I feel like that, I think for us, that is beyond just creating a culture where there's zero tolerance to any kind of exclusion. I think trying to create those individualised experiences that suit my one would be different from your one, would be different from...
I really agree, and I think it makes me think back of... I was really shallow when I first started, because it's like a lot of the time, you know, the idea of being able to just, you know, sell a company or with kind of like a really smart, swanky office and, you know, kind of like all the glitz, and then financial package. And that actually, when I'm recruiting in a lot of talent, any demographic now, the questions that we have in interviews are a lot about kind of like more about those softer values, flexibility, health and well-being approaches, and everything, and our culture and our vision towards that, and it not being set in stone. And it's great. I mean, it really challenges us as employees to make sure that we are having those conversations, or are armed to, you know, say, this is our approach, but then also this is the flexibility that we can give you as well.
And areas that you can flex on.
I think it is that element. You know, somebody once told me, not because of me, I just want to say this before I say it, but she says, you know, Pauline, I don't live to work. You know, I work to live. And, you know, back then in an investment bank where your seniors are pushing you to work as many hours as possible, that isn't what you wanted. And I think we're seeing that with the generation of talent that is entering the industry. What's important to them is the purpose of the organisations that they work for, the values that they have, and that it extends beyond the basic principles, that it looks at things like what are you doing around climate, how are you developing talent coming forward, and, you know, and how can they pay it back and pay it forward to others. So they want that, but they also want flexibility in their careers. They want mobility and the ability to move around, to work, if you're in an agency world, to work with different clients, the ability to not think that I've got to wait dead man's shoes and wait for someone to pop off before I can move up to the next level. So we've got to think about how we mobilise the talent. And, you know, I literally this week, we're on Careers Week at Dentsu, and we have a program called The Code that is all about attracting and giving the skills, the digital skills, to the next generation of talent and working with young children. And the program's 5-6 years old now, and one of those individuals who now works for us interviewed our global CEO at the start of Careers Week and turned around and said, I want to be the CEO next. So, you know, that's what they want. You know, being able to show that we can develop and we can provide those skills, we bring that talent into our workforce, and they have the opportunity to be interviewing the global CEO for the whole organisation, is what the next generation want.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, but on that mobilising talent piece, when we had our call, Rob, you were talking to me about, you know, the way that Jellyfish helps and promotes people. Just talk about that.
Yeah, so very quickly, it's systemic. So we went straight to the root of the challenge. And so what we do is we don't have line managers in the traditional sense. We don't have the pyramid hierarchies. So what ends up happening is that you own your career like a hobby, where you're responsible, you're passionate. It's down to you to learn, to develop, and to set up what your expectations are and what you'd like to achieve. And you're given a support network. And then you understand the outcomes that you're looking for, and then you set out your goals and objectives, and you take your career. Then you're able to submit a business case if you think you're adding value over and above your role, and that business case, very clear format, and that goes to a panel. And the best thing about it is that panel, by the time the case goes to the panel, it's anonymized. So everybody in the organization is talking about value exchange, the outcomes, tangible outcomes, and it's measured on that value exchange so that you just don't know who the individual is, and what that's led to, you know,
what will the upside?
reduction by at least 10 percentage points on the gender gap. It means that we're getting all the underrepresented groups feeling confident. We know we've taken unconscious bias out of the process. I mean, the clue's in the name, unconscious bias, so it's hard to train people to do that. And it's all having the desired impact. On top of that, we're getting that mobility because we don't have heads of, because of this lack of hierarchy. We have steering groups and distributed accountability. So each of the people in that, it's not tokenism. So we're not putting a female in a senior role or a black or Asian person in that role as tokenism, which means you're setting them up to fail because they haven't had the previous exposure. They get to join the steering group, take some accountabilities where their superpower lies, and then they get full exposure to the strategy of that function, and therefore all they've got to do is add more value than themselves in the future. No one needs to be displaced for them to continue to progress. And what that leads to is, a lot of retention. We got in all of our steering groups, we've got 2,300 people, 145 in our leadership, and you have to get to 105 people before the tenure is less than 5 years. And I think in digital, that is like dog years. I mean, you might multiply it by 7.
How long I've been in media.
They're lifers if you last 5 years or more. So, we're really delighted with how we're managing to retain. We can't retain everyone, but we're pretty proud of the way in which we're mobilising.
And it's a really different approach. Our time is up. Hopefully, do we have time for a couple of questions, Sam, or one? Are there any burning questions from the audience?
Question. Obviously, some great ideas there about how you are retaining diverse talent, but what successful ways have you found at reaching underrepresented talent?
Well, for me, going straight for the communities. There is no, we literally, because we're running the academies and we know it's more about aptitude, ambition, and talent, we are going in. So in Baltimore, for example, we don't just put an ad out, we go straight into the communities where most people in that community will not even know. We tell them, but in 3 years, we say to them, you could be earning $70,000, $100,000, because you could become a really prominent and expert around programmatic, for example, and you'll be paid more than a junior doctor. They don't know that. And so we go in, we tell them, we will take you, we'll hold your hands, and we will get you to that point. You just need to stick with us for those 3 years.
I think the only other, it's brilliant that we can do these things. I think then we've got the responsibility as employers to help support those people when they come in, because we're not yet at a place where we have fully inclusive cultures that are fully level playing fields. So I think what we're then finding...
It's understanding, isn't it?
Yeah,
but
what
when
we're then
people
finding,
come in,
people
you
need
need to
more
support
pastoral
them.
support, they need different types of learning and development, not just like, yes, let's make you the most amazing programmatic buyer trader, but like also what else might they need to help get them on an even keel. So it's really interesting.
It's really interesting. Dino's looking at me. Have you got a quick question, Dino?
Not allowed.
We're having our break here.
Sorry, we're eating everyone's lunchtime.
Pay, bonusing is gaps and discrepancies, all those things. Nothing has been mentioned so far about panel in retaining people, as well as, let's say, diversity inclusion at the top in terms of role models. Isn't that the most important thing?
So
You're looking at me. I can
Nice one. Throw back the names in.
You can go around it. Why haven't we mentioned and discussed those things, which I think if you spoke to anyone outside of this room, or you do a survey, whatever else, the things that come up as really important.
So I think it is really important. Pay and bonus and understanding the gaps between different groups is really important. It's really important that you look at the data, that you report the data, and that you find the actions around each group. They will be different for the different groups. We've just done gender, we've done ethnicity, and we've done LGBT pay gaps this year for the UK. It is really important that you go deep and you have a look at that. And actually, without having the data about people, it's harder to understand what the gaps are. So that starts a long chain, a strategic program that says, right, we need to know who's there. We need to understand why there are, who's in the organisation, where the gaps exist, and then what do we need to do about it. I think some of the things which I'm glad we're doing as well, the flexible public holidays and things like that, those are things that are part of the overall offering that we as an employer can give. So both whether that's benefits, whether that's flexibility, whether that's sabbaticals, whether that's care, whether it's neutralising gender, maternity and paternity offerings so that anyone who starts a family can have equal benefits would be really critical. And we're further behind in this industry than we are than they are out there. So if we think we're doing well, we're not there yet. And so those are things that we absolutely have to do, but it requires time and it's going to take us time, but we should be showing the steps to get us there. So can we get to 12 weeks? Can we get to 12 weeks equal pay for maternity, paternity, and parental care leave? Can we do that first? Then can we move on? And then can we get to 24, 26, etc.? So we have to start to talk about those things. And actually, I think that's something that we're a little bit shy of doing. We're not as consistent as, I would say, financial services, consultancy world, or the law firms.
Sam's standing up. We've got to go.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Face to death. A huge round of applause from you.